In the grand cyclical tapestry of existence, there are threads of such primordial significance that to pull upon them is to unravel reality itself. We speak of beginnings and endings, of dawns and of dusks, yet we rarely contemplate the author of that very sequence. We measure our lives in heartbeats, in seasons, in the turning of ages. But what is the metronome to which all of creation is set? It is a question that leads us into the gray, mythic heart of the Aurbis, to a presence felt in the rising of the sun and the inexorable march of history. A spirit whose very being is the bulwark against the formless chaos of untime. Today, we seek to understand the architect of causality, the golden dragon who is time itself, Akatosh. Before the mountains were raised, before the seas were drawn, before the very concept of before had been given leave to exist, there was only the gray maybe, the Aurbis, a state of profound potential, born from the interplay of two cosmic forces, Anu, the essence of stasis, of is, and Padome, the agent of change, of is not. From their inextricable dance, a procession of original spirits, the Atada, would shimmer into being. These were beings of unimaginable power, formless and infinite, unburdened by the limitations that would later define mortality. Yet, even among these divine progenies, a hierarchy of emergence would establish itself. And the very first to achieve a distinct consciousness, to separate from the undifferentiated potential of the Aurbis, was a spirit of order, of permanence, and of duration. The Aldmer would call him Auri-El, the Imperials Akatosh. He was the first thought of Anu, a definitive statement of existence in the face of Padomic chaos. The ancient Aldmeri text, the Monomyth, gives us a glimpse into this genesis, though it is a truth filtered through the lens of millennia and culture. It states, Anu-El, who was the soul of Anu, befriended Sithis, and they created 12 worlds to live in. But Padome, in his jealousy, destroyed them. Anu-El, in his grief, saved the remnants and cobbled them together into a single world, Nirn. But Padome returned and shattered Nirn. Anu-El gathered the fragments once more, and this time he wept. His tears, it is said, became the first Atada. The first of these, and eldest, was Akatosh. This is, of course, a simplification, a parable. The truth is likely more abstruse, beyond the comprehension of minds bound by the very linearity Akatosh would come to represent. He was the anchor, the first fixed point in a sea of boundless possibility. His emergence was not an act of creation in the mortal sense, but an act of definition. He did not build the house, he first conceived of the blueprint and the unyielding foundation upon which it could be built. Then came the architect of the trap, the missing god, Lorkhan. he approached the spirits with a proposition, a grand design for a new reality, Mundus, the mortal plane. It would be a place of immense complexity, a nexus of creation and reflection, a world where the spirits could experience a new way of being. He promised a realm where their own progenies could be born, a world of narrative and self-discovery. Akatosh, the great dragon of time, was swayed. Perhaps he saw in Lorkhan's plan a way to give his own nature, duration, sequence, and causality, the ultimate expression. A stage upon which history itself could play out. He agreed to be a chief architect of this new world, and in so doing, he and the others who agreed, the Aedra, began to invest their very essence into the project. They poured their divinity into the raw firmament of Mundus, weaving themselves into its fabric. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Lorkhan's plan was more costly than any had anticipated. Mundus was not a reflection of their power, but a drain upon it. The Adada who participated found themselves bound, their divinity hemorrhaging into their creation. They became the bones of the world, the earth bones. They were trapped. The Aldmer remember this as the Great Betrayal. Furious and diminished, the Aedra turned upon Lorkhan. At the fore was Akatosh's martial aspect, the warrior king, Auri-El. At a grand council known as the Convention, held at the Adamantine Tower, the oldest structure on Nirn, they passed judgment. The text known simply as Sithis offers a stark account. Akatosh is the first of the Aedra to have a name, for he was the first to crystallize from the chaos. His is the authority of primacy, of being the first to be. When the Aedra slew Lorkhan, they ripped out his heart and flung it to the world below, to remind his creations of the price of betrayal. In this singular, violent act, Akatosh and his cohort defined the foundational laws of their new prison. Lorkhan was sundered, his divine spark cast down to become the heart of the world, and the Aedra, now pitiably weakened, stabilized the mortal plane. But the greatest act was yet to come. To prevent the world from dissolving back into the timeless chaos of the dawn, Akatosh performed the ultimate sacrifice. He imposed his very nature upon it. He established linear time. From the chaos of the dawn, where past, present, and future bled into one another, he forged a singular, unyielding progression. A beginning, a middle, and an end. He became the structure, the syntax of reality. Every tick of the clock, every sunrise, every mortal breath drawn and spent is a testament to his eternal sacrifice. He is not merely a god of time. He is time. And in doing so, he became the chief jailer of the very prison he had helped to build for himself and for all who resided within it. In the nascent ages that followed the dawn, the Merethic era, mortal civilizations began to take root upon the soil of Nirn. The Aldmer, the progenitors of all elven races, carried with them a profound memory of their divine heritage and a bitter resentment for their mortal trappings. They revered the Aedra who had been trapped alongside them, and at the apex of their pantheon stood Auri-El. To the High Elves, Auri-El was not merely a time god. He was the king of the gods, the soul of Anu and Auri-El, who had led their ancestors from the lost continent of Aldmeris. They believed that by following his precepts and living lives of perfect discipline and arcane mastery, they could one day shed their mortal flesh and reascend to the heavens to become spirits once more. Auri-El's bow was a symbol of their reach for the sun, his shield their defiance against the corrupting influence of the mortal world. For the Aldmer, time was not a river to be navigated, but a cage from which to escape, with Auri-El as their key. As the Varieties of Faith in the Empire explains, Auri-El is the soul of Anu-El, who is the soul of Anu the Everything. He is the chief of most Aldmeri pantheons. Most Altmer and Bosmer claim direct descent from Auri-El. In his only known moment of weakness, he agreed to take his part in the creation of the mortal plane. To make up for it, Auri-El led the original Aldmer against the armies of Lorkhan. Yet, as the Aldmer venerated the elven king of Auri-El, a different and altogether more terrible expression of the time god's dominion was taking hold in the frozen north. In Skyrim, he was Akatosh, the dragon god of time, but he was not worshipped, he was feared. His firstborn, the great black dragon Alduin, ruled the land with absolute tyranny. The dragons were not mere beasts. They were fragments of the time god himself, shards of his being, possessed of incredible power and an innate understanding of the dragon language, the very language of creation. Their reign was absolute, enforced by the Dragon Cult, a priesthood of mortals granted a sliver of their master's power. To the early needs of Skyrim, Akatosh was not a benevolent king or a structural principle. He was the distant, silent progenitor of their oppressors. The sky itself was a source of dread. This brutal hegemony could not last. The spark of rebellion was fanned into a flame, supposedly by the intervention of another deity, Kine, the warrior widow of Shor, the Nordic aspect of Lorkhan. She gifted mortals with the Thu'um, the ability to use their voice as the dragons did. The Dragon War was a conflict of apocalyptic proportions. Mortals, newly empowered, rose up against their draconic masters. The rebellion was led by figures of legend: Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Goldenhilt, and Feldir the Old. Even with the power of the voice, they found they could not truly destroy Alduin. He was an eternal force, a part of Akatosh himself. In their desperation, they turned to a method of last resort, an artifice that bent the laws of creation. They used an Elder Scroll, a fragment of creation itself, to perform the unprecedented feat. They did not kill Alduin, they could not. Instead, they cast him adrift in the currents of time, pushing him out of their era. It was a profound act of defiance, using the very fabric of Akatosh's domain to exile his most powerful scion. In the wake of his victory, a new pact was subtly forged. Those who had shown the greatest aptitude for the Thu'um, those with the soul of a dragon in the body of a mortal, would be known as the Dragonborn. A new expression of Akatosh's gift, born not of subjugation, but of liberation. The age of dragons ended, but the dragon's blood will now flow in the veins of mortals. As the First Era dawned, the heartland of Tamriel was in the grip of the Aelids, the wild elves of Cyrodiil. They were cousins to the Altmer, but their worship had taken a darker turn. While some still paid homage to the Aedra, many had fallen into the worship of the Daedric princes, drawing power from the profane realms of Oblivion. Their empire was built upon the backs of human slaves, the Naids of Cyrodiil, who suffered under a cruelty that was both baroque and absolute. From this desperate nadir of human suffering arose a figure of singular destiny, Alessia, the slave queen. She prayed, not to the Daedra for power, nor to the absent Lorkhan for liberation, but to the king of the Aedra, Akatosh. She begged for an end to her people's torment, and in a moment that would define the fate of the continent for millennia, Akatosh answered. The nature of this divine encounter is shrouded in allegory, but its consequences are etched into the stone of history. The trials of Saint Alessia describe it thus. Akatosh, pitying the plight of men, drew blood from his own heart. He blessed Alessia and her descendants with the dragon's blood, and from that divine sacrifice, he forged an artifact of supreme power, the Amulet of Kings. This was more than a mere trinket. It was a covenant, a sacred pact between the dragon god of time and the race of men. So long as Alessia's heirs wore the amulet and sat upon the throne of Cyrodiil, Akatosh would maintain the barriers between Mundus and the chaotic realms of Oblivion, keeping the Daedric hordes at bay. The red diamond was the soul gem of the covenant. It was proof of the dragonborn lineage. With this divine blessing, Alessia's slave rebellion swelled into a holy war. Aided by the Nordic hero Morahaus and the demigod Pellinal Whitestrake, she overthrew the Aeliad Empire and established the first Cyrodiilic empire of men. The Amulet of Kings became a sigil of her dynasty, and the lighting of the dragonfires in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City became the ultimate symbol of the Covenant's power, a promise kept between God and mortal. But the faith of men can be a perilous, unstable thing. Centuries later, during the reign of the Alessian Order, a fanatical, monotheistic sect known as the Marukhati Selective rose to prominence. They were human supremacists, deeply resentful of the elven aspects of their faith. They looked upon Akatosh, their chief deity, and saw the shadow of the Anu Auri-El. This elven taint was, to them, an unbearable corruption. In their hubris, they sought to perform a cosmic surgery. They desired to cut the elven Auri-El from the divine oversoul of the time god, to make Akatosh purely a god of men. Using the power of the white gold tower, a reality-warping spire of immense potency, they enacted their ritual. The results were catastrophic. You cannot simply redefine the God who defines reality. The attempt resulted in an event of unparalleled temporal horror. The Middle Dawn, a dragon break that lasted, according to the Khajiit, for 1,008 years. For a millennium, time shattered, linearity dissolved. The world was plunged back into the chaos of the Dawn era. History became a maelstrom. The very laws of causality were suspended. The texts that survive from this period are fractured, contradictory, and maddening. One account from the time reads, "The sky was an infernal orange. The stars had vanished. The imperial city was a ruin. Yet it was also more glorious than ever before. I saw legions of the past march alongside spectral soldiers of a future that would never be. I saw a man give birth to a sword. The dragon broke, and the world was unmade." When time was finally restored, stitched back together by the sheer, indomitable nature of Akatosh himself, no one knew for certain what had truly transpired. The Marukhati Selective was gone, their ambition having immolated them, and no one could say for sure if they had succeeded. Was the Akatosh who emerged from this temporal wound the same as the one who went in? Or had they, in their madness, truly created a schism in the god of time, forever separating the human Akatosh from the elven Auri-El? The question remains one of the most profound and unsettling mysteries in Tamrielic theology. The covenant forged by Alessia was a delicate one, predicated on a continuous line of dragonborn emperors. Throughout the long interregnum of the Second Era, this chain was broken. Warlords and pretenders ruled, but none could light the dragon fires. The Amulet of Kings would not recognize them. The Great Pact lay dormant, and the barriers between worlds weakened. It was during this time that the folly of Varan Aquilarius served as a grim reminder of the Covenant's sanctity. In his desperate attempt to legitimize his rule, he and his 5 companions sought the amulet, believing a ritual could grant him the dragon's blood. Instead, the ritual was corrupted by the necromancer Manimarco, triggering the Soul Burst, a massive explosion of arcane energy that tore a hole in the veil between Mundus and Oblivion. Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination, began his assault on Nirn, the Plane Meld. It was a stark lesson. The blood of the dragon is a gift, not a prize to be stolen. Akatosh's covenant could not be circumvented. The rise of Tiber Septim, a true dragonborn, at the end of the Second Era, restored the covenant. For over 400 years, the Septim dynasty ruled a united Tamriel. The dragonfires burned. The Amulet of Kings passed from one emperor to the next, and the pact held. A golden age of peace and prosperity settled over the land, all under the silent, watchful aegis of Akatosh's promise. The people of the empire felt secure, believing the walls of reality to be immutable, the threat of oblivion a distant memory. They were wrong. The Third Era ended in blood and fire. The assassination of Septim VII and all his known heirs by the Daedric cultists of the Mythic Dawn shattered the Septim line. The dragonfires were extinguished. With the throne empty and the amulet without a wearer, the covenant was broken. The Prince of Destruction, Mehrunes Dagon, seized his chance. Oblivion gates tore open across the face of Tamriel, unleashing Daedric legions upon an unprepared world. The fate of all Mundus rested upon finding the last hidden heir of Tiber Septim, a humble priest of Akatosh living in Kvatch named Martin. He was the last of the dragon's blood. As Dagon himself, a force of nature beyond mortal opposition, stepped into the mortal plane, Martin Septim made the ultimate choice. He understood that the covenant could not simply be restored. The threat was too immediate. It had to be fulfilled once and for all. He knew what he must do, not as an emperor, but as a final, perfect vessel for the amulet's power. He broke the amulet, releasing the potent soul gem at its heart and mingling its ancient power with his own dragon's blood. In that moment, Martin Septim ceased to be. He became a vessel, an avatar for the spirit of Akatosh. A magnificent, terrifying dragon of incandescent fire and righteous fury materialized in the heart of the imperial city. The battle was brief, a clash of divine forces. The avatar of Akatosh fought the Prince of Destruction, and with a final, savage blow, cast the Daedric Lord back into the depths of oblivion. The cost of this victory was absolute. Martin was gone, consumed in the transfiguration. The Amulet of Kings, the linchpin of the Covenant for 3,000 years, was destroyed. But in its destruction, a new permanent ward was created. The Avatar's sacrifice reinforced the barriers between Mundus and Oblivion, sealing them shut far more securely than the Dragonfires ever could. The Alessian Covenant was not broken, it was fulfilled in the most profound and final way imaginable. Akatosh, through his last Dragonborn Emperor, had saved the world, but the Age of Emperors was over. The God of Time had closed a chapter of history forever. Two centuries passed. The Empire waned, and the memory of the Oblivion Crisis faded into legend. The world felt safe from otherworldly threats. But the breaking of the dragon in the First Era was not a permanent solution. It was a deferment. And time for Akatosh's children is a circle. Alduin, the World Eater, firstborn of Akatosh, prophesied to return at the end of time, reappeared. Cast forward by the Elder Scroll, he arrived in a world where dragons were myths and the Dragonborn were emperors of a bygone age. He began the process of resurrecting his long-dead brethren from their burial mounds, seeking to re-establish his ancient dominion. Herein lies the final great mystery of Akatosh. Was Alduin's return part of the divine plan? Is he, as he claims, the true firstborn, acting out of his designated role as the harbinger of the end, a necessary force to conclude one kalpa or world cycle, to begin the next? Or is he a rebellious son, arrogantly defying his father's design by choosing to dominate the world instead of devouring it? The ancient dragon Parthenax, himself a child of Akatosh, pondered this very question. In this new, desperate age, Akatosh's gift was given once more, not to an emperor to rule, but to a hero to save. A final dragonborn, the Dovahkiin, emerged, a soul from a forgotten age, destined to confront the World Eater. This was a different kind of covenant, not one of ritual and rule, but one of raw power and existential necessity. The last Dragonborn confronted Alduin not on Nirn, but in Sovngarde, the Hall of Shore. And there they did what the ancient heroes could not. They defeated him utterly. But the question lingers, a somber, philosophical echo. Did the Dragonborn save the world from a tyrant? Or did they merely delay the inevitable end? In defying Alduin, did they defy the will of Akatosh himself? Perhaps the answer is that Akatosh, the divine principle of time, allows for such deviations. He sets the path, but allows for the struggles that occur upon it. He is not the hand that moves the pieces, but the board upon which the game is played. The story of Akatosh is the story of Tamriel. It is a narrative written in the blood of gods and the deeds of mortals. From the formless chaos of the dawn, he gave reality its structure. Through his covenant, he gave humanity its empire and its shield. In his avatar's sacrifice, he gave the world its salvation. And in the soul of the Dragonborn, he gave mortals the power to shape their own destiny, even against his own progeny. He is the great dragon, the god of time. He is not a benevolent father who answers every prayer, nor a wrathful king who demands constant tribute. His presence is more fundamental, more profound. He is the cosmic law that binds the Aurbis. He is the relentless, unforgiving, and yet utterly necessary march of moments that we call life. He is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And when the final bell of this world tolls, it is his name that will be whispered on the wind, as the dragon finally, truly eats his own tail.